Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining me today for our session, The Emergence of Revenue Intelligence and Revenue Performance. Today's session will be all about uncovering how organizations today are and should be thinking about their revenue growth transformations and understanding what that transformation journey looks like. My name is Embir, and I'm the Senior Manager of Solution Offerings here at Exactly, and I'm excited to be here with you today at Unleashed. Quick overview on what we'll touch on during this session. First, we'll do a brief overview of the sustainable revenue characteristics and understand the imperative that is driving this revenue transformation movement. Next, I'll introduce you to and walk you through the Exactly maturity model, but framed from the perspective of predictable revenue, which we'll touch on in just a minute. And finally, we'll review the transformation planning process, a best practices approach in helping organizations navigate and accelerate their digital transformation journey. Now, you may have heard a term Accenture has coined, never normal, mentioned in earlier sessions. It's the notion that there are many dislocations in the business world today, be it uncertain economic conditions due to a pandemic, or the acceleration of new and disruptive competitive forces. And business leaders now, more than ever, not only need to grow their business, but also need to withstand the eventual volatility we'll see in the world, financial markets, and competitive dynamics. And so with that, what are some of the ways organizations can bolster their revenue functions to better address this new world of never normal? Generally speaking, there are three mutually exclusive characteristics of revenue that, when combined, allow organizations to grow in virtually any economic climate or market dynamic. The first characteristic is resilient revenue, the notion of adopting a culture focused on organizational agility that allows you to thrive and grow revenue in volatile and competitive markets. The second characteristic is profitable revenue. This is all about maximizing the effectiveness of your go-to-market teams to efficiently unlock new market opportunities. And last, and this is one we'll focus on for the remainder of this session, is predictable revenue. This is all about reliable revenue growth that is removed from intuition bias and gut feel. And so why should we care about these revenue characteristics? What are the potential impacts to your business that drive such an imperative? The reality is, each one of these characteristics has a direct impact on things like revenue and productivity, cost, and risk. From the lens of predictable revenue, here's what research analysts are saying. Revenue growth is uncertain. Only 6% of revenue leaders are confident about their team's ability to meet or exceed revenue goals. This is extremely concerning, considering revenue is the fuel for any organization, and it's a key indicator in assessing the strength of any business. But the lack of confidence and skepticism in your pipeline, well, surely manifests itself among your revenue generating teams as well. And what happens when sales reps lack confidence in their ability to perform? They lose motivation. They move on to an environment where they feel that they can succeed. And this is an extremely costly circumstance. Research shows that 29% of salespeople attrit annually, and on average, it costs $155,000 to replace just a single sales rep. It's challenging to be cost-effective when having to deal with such unexpected financial burdens. And last, there's tremendous risk for both public and private organizations alike in not being able to call a revenue number and then deliver on it. For private organizations, there's risk in losing outside capital investment and stagnating growth and innovation. For public organizations, they risk losing significant market cap and perceived value of their business. See a Fortune 100 company that saw their share price drop by a staggering 31% after having reported a 4% year-over-year decline in revenue. Now, I'm sure many of you today understand or have even experienced all of the compelling reasons to want to be an organization supported and driven by predictable revenue. I'm also sure that many of you are not so naive to think that being a predictable revenue organization is as simple as flipping a switch. It truly is a transformation journey that must ascend multiple levels of maturity to unlock the power and benefit that predictable revenue offers. So let's take a look at what that maturity model looks like. Any digital transformation an organization pursues is challenging and oftentimes have many failure points. In fact, the Boston Consulting Group suggests through their research that 70% of organizations fall short on delivering their transformation objectives. Why is that? Well, surprisingly, oftentimes organizations feel that technology alone can be sufficient to drive a digital transformation, when in fact, technology only serves as the conduit to which a transformation is delivered. It's the people and processes in addition to technology that truly allow organizations to successfully transform their business. And so naturally, when we define our maturity model for predictable revenue, we make sure to evaluate maturity across each of these three dimensions. Here's a high-level overview of what that looks like, again, from the context of predictable revenue. The first level is manual. We like to think of people that participate in this stage as the questionable heroes. It's a group of individuals that oftentimes go through heroic acts to deliver on a specific objective. And why are there these Herculean efforts to deliver? Well, because these individuals are participating in ad hoc processes, entirely absent of consistency in supporting technology. While we still find many organizations stuck in the manual stage, fortunately, a large contingency of organizations we find have graduated to the automated stage. We like to call the people who participate in this stage as protocol followers. These are organizations that have effectively digitized their processes to drive repeatable results, a huge step in the right direction and foundational to any transformation. However, at this point, people are just following the rules. They know what data must come in and what data must go out, without much regard to the adjacent upstream and downstream processes. At this stage, collaboration is still very weak in the organization. Stage 3, the intelligence stage. This is where you start to unleash the power of technology, specifically around artificial intelligence. And it's where we can start leveraging the mind share of the organization to truly start driving innovation. We like to call the participants of this stage the analytical innovators. These are the participants that understand the internal and external factors of their business and how that data can be augmented to effectively grow and unlock new revenue opportunities. At this stage, organizational processes are still fairly siloed, but they're executing objectively on data-driven insights and intelligence. Stage 4 is the optimized stage. At this point, we subscribe to the notion of digitize everything and do so intelligently. However, predictable revenue cuts across the entire organization, both on the front office and the back office. The optimized stages focus on stakeholder alignment, which is why we call these participants the strategic collaborators. It's a culture of understanding both the upstream and downstream processes that support predictable revenue, and then integrating these processes through seamless cross-functional workflows. For each of these 4 stages, we'll take a deeper look at the people, processes, and technologies in play, and the directional impact on things like revenue growth, cost reduction, and risk mitigation as you move from one stage to the next. Let's take a look at the manual stage. The manual stage is unsurprisingly pretty bare when it comes to predictable revenue. This stage is exclusively focused on understanding the current state of your pipeline and making a determination on where you think you're going to land from the perspective of revenue. And how do we make that determination? Well, through pipeline inspection and pipeline management, a process where sales reps and sales leaders engage in one-on-ones and discuss basic activities, things such as who they've engaged with, what were the outcomes and sentiments from their customer meetings, what are the follow-ups. It's conversations that often start with I think as opposed to I know or I must. And so sales reps and leaders attempt to synthesize this very subjective information and assign quantitative value to it, whether it's probability to close, close amount, close date, and they sprinkle in some intuition bias, and there you have it, a revenue forecast. But is there confidence in that revenue forecast? I can't imagine so. I mean, why would there be? Mapping intuition bias and subjectivity to a quantitative number can't support any form of standardization. And that's simply because there's no consistency among how the sales reps and leaders operate with one another. And while sales leaders may have a better pulse on how to evaluate the state of a customer in your pipeline, they simply cannot be in every meeting of every deal. The managers must work with what they have, and that's mostly the information passed to them from their sales reps through verbal reporting. And oftentimes, what's being reported is fairly questionable. Sandbagging and happy ears, the idea that people hear what they want to hear, it's just all too prevalent. And so with stakeholders not influencing and advocating for robust and standardized processes, and with technology that supports predictable revenue being virtually non-existent, organizations find themselves with a lack of meaningful and consistent data that allow the revenue generating teams to stay focused on where true revenue opportunities lie. For organizations that haven't correlated the quality and consistency of data to productivity, they're often inclined to bridge the productivity gap through more costly propositions, things such as more investment into their enablement and coaching programs, or adding more headcount to their sales force. And so naturally, by not maximizing revenue and reducing costs, organizations expose themselves to more risk. And so clearly, there's a lot to be gained by organizations maturing their processes. And that leads us to the automated stage. This stage is focused on leveraging technology to support the existing processes surrounding predictable revenue. Essentially, it's digitize everything. CRM is the technology at play, and it's typically owned by operations and IT, two new roles that collaborate alongside an organization's revenue-generating teams to institute a more robust, predictable revenue model from which go-to-market teams can operate on. With the goal being to improve data quality that allows sales reps and leaders to make more informed decisions when producing a revenue forecast, managing your data is foundational to that process. We typically refer to this as data hygiene and think of it from two lenses. First, understanding the buyer journey. It's mapping out the stages of your sales cycle and understanding the critical data points that will help inform sales reps and leaders on where the best revenue opportunities exist. Next, managing your data. It's instituting a culture whereby sales reps are continuously managing and updating their data and ultimately maintaining the integrity of your reporting from which you glean your insights. And so naturally, with a structured and digitized approach in how you manage your data, your predictable revenue processes are now aided not only by tactical exercises around data computation and data aggregation, but also strategically through analytical reporting. Capturing the right metrics and right opportunity attributes is certainly a step in the right direction toward a more predictable revenue model, but even still, I'd say there's a lot of room for opportunity here. The processes in the automated stage are still so heavily reliant on human intelligence that your success is merely a function of the human resources and capital you put behind it. And it still doesn't eliminate the factor of intuition bias. And so while developing a sophisticated process governed by standardization and data analytics can move the needle with respect to increasing revenue, it too is often a very costly proposition. So how do we go beyond human intelligence? Naturally, it's artificial intelligence. And that leads us to the next stage of maturity, the intelligence stage. This stage focuses on enhancing existing automated processes. Oftentimes, the same stakeholders at play, sales, operations, IT, but now they've identified new data points that can be collected and augmented in support of more intelligent and predictable revenue outcomes. They've embraced artificial intelligence as the mechanism through which we can make sense of data and deliver valuable insights. And so when we talk about data, what exactly are we referring to? CRM data, of course, is critical. Understanding the historical behavior of an organization's sales cycle, identifying trends and patterns, and then using that information to train AI algorithms to predict revenue outcomes. Then, of course, there's data that helps you identify the health of your accounts, also known as account scoring, information such as emails that help you understand customer sentiment, usage analytics from your customer engagement tools that help identify adoption of your organization's offerings, perhaps serving as a proxy to their overall satisfaction of your business. Or perhaps marketing automation data that helps bring to light your customer's buyer journey, offering insights into their perceived value of your business. And so by bringing together this information, it allows organizations to profoundly change the processes that support a more predictable revenue model. First and foremost, the revenue forecast, which historically is determined through human intelligence and intuition bias, is now replaced by machine intelligence. So science replaces intuition, objectivity replaces subjectivity, precision replaces inaccuracy. Next, data hygiene is enhanced by removing blind spots and exposing important revenue indicators that may not have existed when operating in manual or automated stages. Enhanced data hygiene now allows sales leaders to better identify and address sandbagging and happy years behavior and really restore integrity into the revenue forecasting process. And then, of course, there's the intelligence engine that allows organizations to identify white space, high potential opportunities, or at-risk accounts. But more importantly, how to actually nurture those accounts through guided selling and recommendations on next best actions. Through these insights, organizations have a clear understanding of where they should focus their efforts to maximize their revenue. With sales reps having more confidence in their ability to hit or exceed their number, and being motivated by intelligent processes that allow them to thrive, sales reps are more inclined to grow with your organization, effectively minimizing the cost burden and headache of employee attrition. Now, with all that said, Will forecasting using human intelligence be entirely eliminated at this stage? Probably not, and perhaps maybe never. However, organizations now have the ability to pressure test sales reps and leaders' intuition by cross-referencing it with real-time activity data. They can identify risk early on and take necessary action to course correct. And so while today it may be machine intelligence that's used to validate intuition, it'll likely be the other way around shortly after. Reaching the intelligence stage is certainly a massive achievement, but more predictable revenue can be further influenced by more people, more processes, and more technology. Let's take a look at the optimized stage. Up until now, the concept of predictable revenue was primarily concentrated within the sales and operation departments, of course, with the help of IT. And by and large, maximizing revenue was centrally focused on processes around pipeline management and analytics. However, the reality is predictable revenue cuts across almost the entire organization. Whether departments own insights that help influence predictable revenue, or whether they are receivers of predictable revenue, it does not start and end within the sales and operations departments. Look at the compensation function, for example. They design incentive plans that are intended to drive a specific type of selling behavior, at least if done so properly. And these comp plans are often accompanied by what-if calculators that speculate the incentive benefit of closing a specific deal. These tools are used to reinforce behavioral selling. The incentive benefit for the sales rep typically should be commensurate with the revenue benefit of the organization. In other words, organizations want to pay top compensation dollars to their reps because, from a revenue perspective, they proportionally benefit from it as well. Assuming sales reps actually want to maximize their incentive benefit, well-designed compensation plans are then inherently a predictor of revenue as well. And what about pay and performance data? How does that help influence revenue predictability? Well, what if through machine intelligence, you can leverage that information to predict resource attrition and identify risk and vulnerabilities in your sales force? And then use that information not only to mitigate any identified risk, but proactively engage HR and enablement teams to institute leadership, coaching, and retention programs to maintain stability within the sales organization. After all, wouldn't you say a stable sales organization is critical in supporting a predictable revenue model? These are just a couple examples of how organizations can leverage additional fact-based data to support predictable revenue. But of course, there are parts of the organization, mostly in the back office, that heavily rely on the predictable revenue outcomes that are produced by the front office. Specifically, we're talking about finance and accounting. Ultimately, it's these functions that are held accountable for producing accurate, timely, and reliable financial forecasts, a huge component of which are the revenue and compensation forecasts. These forecasts are communicated to board members, investors, sometimes even publicly made available, and can have profound implications on the direction of a company. It reaffirms the criticality of strong and reliable forecasts, as it's a key variable that oftentimes shape the future of an organization. And so while the optimization stage at first is an acknowledgement of all the stakeholders involved when it comes to predictable revenue, it's then a process of aligning these cross-functional teams through streamlined and integrated workflows, so that organizationally, everybody's operating off a single fact base. It's breaking down silos and enfranchising teams to strategically collaborate and innovate on processes that are beneficial to the collective. And by leveraging the diverse set of data available, and by tapping into mindshare of stakeholders with a vested interest in revenue, that's when organizations can truly maximize revenue, reduce costs, and mitigate risk. So we've seen what various stages of maturity look like from the perspective of predictable revenue. And if you're thinking to yourself, this whole maturity thing is very challenging, well, you're right. Transformations such as these are complex. In fact, research has shown that only 7% of organizations actually complete their digital transformation strategy. And why is that? Again, it's because oftentimes organizations believe that technology alone can transform businesses. They don't take a methodical approach in understanding the people and processes that are critical in supporting these transformation initiatives. And so that's why we have Exactly's Transformation Advisory Services, an offering that is intended to help organizations navigate through these complexities and accelerate their digital transformations. It's a structured workshop focused on 3 phases. First, the discovery phase. This is where we take the opportunity to understand your high-level executive priorities and desired business outcomes. It's also where we get a detailed view into what your current state and ideal future state looks like. So where are you in the maturity curve today, and where do you want to be in the future? And again, these maturity assessments apply to people, processes, and technology. Next, the analyze phase. This is where we synthesize the data we've gathered during the discovery phase, assess through a fit gap analysis any roadblocks to moving toward your future state, and then prioritize how you should approach your transformation. It's in this phase where we also provide an assessment that will quantify the expected value of improving upon your current state. And last, the recommend phase. This is where we map out a unique, multi-phase, multi-solution path to your optimized future state, and then confirm with you that the proposed solution does in fact meet your needs. I highly encourage you to learn more about Xactly's transformation advisory service in subsequent sessions. And as a bonus, this offering is entirely complimentary. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending this session. I hope you found it informative. Enjoy the rest of your time at Unleashed.